Hello, my name is Frank Walstein. I welcome you to this special dialogue on culture and the marriage bill of 2017, supported by the Cross Culture Foundation of Uganda and their partners. So far, the marriage bill is one of the most debated laws in the history of our country. We are talking about a bill that has been in Parliament for over 50 years. The conversation about a law that could consolidate all marriage laws in the country can be traced from as far back as 1964, when the first comprehensive report about this matter was issued by the Rhoda Kalema's Marriage and Divorce Commission. A marriage bill was drafted following that report, but since then it has been hitting snags and facing untold resistance from traditionalists, Christians, Muslims, faith leaders, and many more. A number of issues in this bill have been a source of unending arguments and resistance. We will be looking at some of them shortly. As we speak today, we have the Marriage Act that was made sometime in the early 1900s, but even then, it is not a consolidated act. A number of other acts stand alone. For example, the Marriage Act, the Marriage and Divorce of Mohammedans Act of 1906, which caters for Muslim marriage, Customary Marriage Registration Act of 1973, catering for recognized traditional marriage, the Hindu Marriage and Divorce Act of 1961, which caters for marriage between Hindus and people of allied religions. The Divorce Act and the Marriage of Africans Act, which caters for marriage between Africans or Ugandans of the Christian and Muslim faith. For that matter, the Uganda Law Reform Commission proposed the marriage bill to reform and consolidate laws governing marriage, define the types of marriage, marital rights and duties arising from marriage, grounds for divorce, and other matters related to marriage. The Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda, supported by partners, as I have told you, have conducted research in 8 cultural communities to establish the link between culture and the contentious clauses of the marriage bill. We will be discussing whether it is possible for cultural rights and the provisions in the marriage bill to coexist. Friends, could this bill be a passage or a barrier? In studio, I am joined by Ms. Barbara Babwetera. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda. Good to have you in studio.
Thank you very much, Frank, and good afternoon, viewers.
Okay, we have Honorable Bob Opio. He's the Attorney General of Kel Arul Kingdom. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Frank, and good evening, viewers and listeners.
All right, and Ms. Susan Achen is the program lead Women's Rights and Access to Justice. Is it correct?
Yes.
Okay, good to have you in studio.
Thank you for hosting me. Good evening, viewers.
Okay, and online we'll be joined by Dr. Maxime Hinato. Dr. Maxime is the country rep of UN Women Uganda. He's online. Shortly we shall be talking to him. And we have Honorable Amoding Monica. She's the woman member of parliament, Kume district. She's also online. She will be joining us shortly. Dr. Maxim, can you hear me? All right. I would like to start with you, Dr. Maxim, and then we will bring back the conversation to studio. I want to ask of you, Doctor, what prompted you to support the efforts of having the Marriage Bill 2017 in Uganda to be enacted?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me recognize and express my gratitude for the various institutions that are around the table. Both the government of Uganda, represented by the Ministry of Gender, and also the different cultural institutions. We at UN Women find this bill very critical, not just because it has been in Parliament for years, as you rightfully pointed out, but because it's also play an important role in regulating society at a level that is more than any other bill that we have had. And I want to recognize the efforts made by civil society in pushing for this bill and explaining the importance of the bill for the community. I want to also recognize government's efforts to push that bill from one stage to the other. But what makes it even more interesting is the interest of cultural institutions in backing the different elements of this bill and making sure that whatever is passed has the potential of transforming the life of women and men of Uganda. I want to only note a couple of issues to us that are critical. The first one, and I think you maybe alluded to that, is the property right in cohabitation. We have widowhood rights. We have issues that have with bride wealth provisions, etc., in the conjugal rights. These are issues that can push or impede the life of millions of Ugandans. And we know that Uganda has the habit of setting the pace in the region and in Africa in social sectors and on social issues. So we want, through pushing this bill, give the opportunity of this country to continue in that direction. And in terms of the details of what we are doing, what we are planning to do, and what as UN family, because you don't want to see just UN women behind this, but it's like the UN family represented by UN women. I would like to maybe recommend Evelyn, who is around the table, to get into more details. But I want, by my presence, to express the interests of the UN family in Uganda, to support the government of Uganda, to support Parliament, and I want to wave to the honorable members of Parliament that are around the table to push government and to support government in achieving this tremendous endeavor that is going to change the life of women and girls.
Doctor, the conversation is that this bill, once enacted, can protect women from violence, domestic violence, as we know it. And I would like to hear from you, comment about the significance and scope of violence against women and girls at regional or maybe even the global level.
Listen, Uganda spends something like 77 billion every year to address issues of gender-based violence in Uganda. It is a tremendous amount of money, and you can calculate the opportunity cost of that money. Apart from that, we are talking about several lives that are torn apart, hopes in marriage that become something else. And the amounts of people that are close parents, relatives, or married people that are responsible for violence against women and girls is extraordinary. We have an amount of violence outside of the house, but what we see inside the house, because the police is more equipped to address violence outside of the house. But when we are talking about violence within the family boundaries, it becomes something important. And as you know very well, this law represents an opportunity to address it. Now, the last thing I want to say about it is the responsibility of men. Whether you take it from the household already in terms of responsibility, but even when you step out of the household, in the community, at the police station, in the health center, at the judiciary, at every single step where that girl or that woman is trying to seek justice, you see a man on the way. So what is the capacity of that man to stand firm and to say violence against women will not be perpetuated through me is something that is good. What we see most often for good men is to just say, I'm not violent myself, and that's enough. We have seen that this is not enough. We have to go further than yourself and then act on other people around you. So when you see violence or premises of violence or risk of violence or people that are vulnerable to violence.
Doctor, lastly, you know, in Africa, traditional leaders are very, very crucial when it comes to such matters, domestic violence, you know, and other aspects. Do you think you will continue engaging traditional leaders even after, hopefully, this bill has been enacted?
UN Women has facilitated the establishment of a large group of traditional leaders in Africa that's called COTLA. It's a Council of Traditional Leaders in Africa. And I want to recognize the commitment of these royalties and highnesses to eradicate violence against women on the continent, and particularly in Uganda. And we have a lot of traditional leaders that are committed, faith-based organizations that are committed. That's what encouraged UN Women to continue pushing for this. And I want to end by saying that it's a mistake, it's wrong, it's misleading to think that our tradition is violent. In a lot of places in Uganda, we have lessons to teach international community in terms of how we used to treat women in the past. So what happens on the way is what we need to look for and see how we can address it. African societies in the past have been very, very good in terms of treating the women. We have seen, look at the example of even war. We have seen in the past people stop fighting in order to allow women and girls to leave the battlefield. But nowadays, people even target women and girls when they are fighting. It means that there is something that went wrong at a certain point. That's what I'm calling all of my fellow men to look into it closely and to see how we can address it. And in that respect, I want to salute the efforts made by traditional leaders in Uganda.
I would like to thank you, Dr. Maxim. Thank you for giving us the time. And we will let you go and attend to other tasks. Again online, we are joined by Miss Angela Nakafero. She's the Commissioner of Gender, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. If you can hear me, Angela. Angela, you are there? Okay. All right, let's bring the conversation back to studio, and we have a spirited conversation about the Marriage Bill 2017, which has been in Parliament for over 50 years, 56 specifically, I think. Yeah, and I would like to start with you, Barbara. First of all, tell us about Cross Cultural Foundation and your interest in this.
Thank you very much, Frank. The Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda is a non-governmental organization that has been in existence for now more than 13 years, still young but growing. And we exist with a mission to promote the recognition of culture as vital for human development that responds to our diversities in Uganda. The Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda promotes the use of positive culture as a basis or a source for development. And among our programs that we are executing, we actually look at cultural rights. How do we promote them? How do we identify them? We do research, we disseminate information, and we also encourage the use of culture in development as an approach to help, to contribute to the development of our country. At the Cross Cultural Foundation in the year 2016, we set out for the very first time to try and interrogate the relationship between culture and human rights, especially women's rights. It has always been said, or it could be a misconception, that women's rights originate from the statutory law. But we went out with the hypothesis to challenge ourselves and say, really, did this actually begin with the coming of statutory laws in Uganda? Or there was a special place for women, given the role that they play in our cultures, that women actually have rights, but which rights are defined by culture? And we conducted this research in a Choli community. The outcomes, the results were overwhelming. We found that there is a lot actually that is good. And to me as an individual, when I looked at that and having been in the world of promoting women's rights, I thought the Rhoda report was a replica of actually the Acholi culture. everything that the law was talking about is what they actually are practicing as part of their culture.
The one that I mentioned earlier, the Rhoda Kalema report
Exactly.
of 1964.
64, yes,
Okay.
please. So based on that, we went ahead and challenged ourselves. So if this is the case, why then is the marriage bill failing to pass? Is there a conflict between culture and this particular bill? So that prompted us to do this research, and we've done it in 8 cultural communities, looking at the community of Acholi, Lango, Teso, Alur, Karamoja, Busoga, Buganda, and Toro. Out of the 16 recognized cultural institutions by the government, we have worked with 8. We have investigated in 8 cultural institutions.
And you're trying to find the link between, culture and the provisions in this bill we are talking about.
Exactly. Trying to interrogate the convergence and the divergence of the clauses that are said to be contentious. The laws that, the clauses that are felt to be in contravention with the Ugandan cultures. So that is the background against which we, as the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda, came up to say, okay, let's conduct a research and identify what does culture say regarding the age of marriage?
Yes.
What does it say about cohabitation? Is cohabitation recognized as a form of marriage in our cultural institutions or not? And the results indicate actually more of convergence than divergence. So the question is, where is the problem?
Convergence, what do you mean when you say convergence?
Convergence, I mean there are a number of areas where what the provisions of the cultural norms, practices, principles stipulate is actually what is stated in the marriage bill. So where is the problem? Why are the cultural leaders resisting this bill, yet what is being stated in the bill is exactly what their culture says in terms of principles, in terms of norms, in terms of practice, in terms of taboos?
Mr. Pio, is it a lack of information?
Absolutely. That's where I'm beginning from. Lack of information from both angles. The people who are making the law, discussing the bill, and who also drafted the bill, and also the communities. You see, there was a lot of suspicion between the two groups, the intention of the bill. But when you read the bill, and according to Alur culture, our values and our norms are all incorporated here. What is not there is the context, the explanation. So the only fear is when it comes to interpretation by the courts, for example, will they take our context and interpret it that way? Otherwise, like Barbara says, what has been in the bill is what we have always practiced for years and years, and they still exist and they work for us, except that they are not written. So we need more information on this with the cultural leaders, and the consultation should be with the cultural institutions and their appointed, accredited leaders, not just somebody like an Alur you pick from the street of Kampala and he says, in Alur we do this and that. Many of them lack in the depth of the knowledge of culture. And therefore, further investigations should be taken down there to explain to these people. I am surprised also that some cultural leaders are the ones resisting the bill. Because when I read it, and having worked in the cultural institution for over 7 years now, I see no contradiction, or very little. We only need some explanation of context.
Barbara, CCEFU went to 8 traditional communities. But you know, we are a multicultural, society.
Yeah.
The cultures here are so many.
Yes.
More than 50, actually. And every culture has a way they consider marriage, the marriage institution. There is a way the Baganda treat it, the Batoro, it's quite different. So how then can you use these as a representative of all the cultures in Uganda?
Thank you very much, Frank. What I must say is that cultures are different from one place to another. But in Uganda, when you try to look at our history, there is some connectedness between a variety of cultural institutions. And what strikes me most is that when you look at the different cultures, you will find that there is a string of connectedness in terms of values, in terms of principles. But what might differ might be the practice, might be the process, but when the underlying principle is the same. I might share just one example of a principle that is cutting across, and not only in Uganda, but actually it cuts across to Kenya, to Tanzania, to South Africa, go up to the north. Talk about the value or the principle of humanis, what we might call in Luganda obuntu bulamu. Among the Banyankole, Batoro, Banyoro, we say obuntu.
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. Among the Baganda, it is obuntu bulamu.
I found that in South Africa as well.
Exactly.
It means the same thing.
Go up to Alur, they call it kuramatira. It's the same, it's the principle. What does it show? You go to is it Karamoja, where they call it Acholi.
Among the Acholi.
Kit Matir.
Kit
Matir,
Yes. So the principle, you'll find that it cuts across. It's the same. But you'll find the way it is being expressed may slightly differ. So what does that tell us? Even if we sample 8, probably it would give a ground or impetus to some other organizations to go out and conduct further research with the other cultural institutions we have not sampled. But the difference will be minimal.
Okay, Susan, why do you think cultural leaders are scared, or they are skeptical, they are dubious about the marriage bill we are talking about?
Thank you, Frank. Before I respond to your question, I would like to make one quick clarification about the origin of the marriage bill.
Yes.
In 2013, the Parliament of Uganda discussed the marriage and divorce bill. And during that discussion, a number of clauses were saved, were debated and passed. And then the bill was saved. That meant it was not withdrawn from the floor of Parliament. And there was a lot of controversy from a number of clauses, which led to a directive that further consultations be had. And that is what gave birth to the marriage bill. However, as we are having this discussion...
The word divorce. Was it a problem of nomenclature, naming?
Yes, partly. That is partly one of the objections that society as a whole has had to the bill, because of the word divorce. But as we are having this discussion, we need to be aware that what is still saved on the floor of Parliament and recognized by the government as a bill is the marriage and divorce bill. Now, the marriage and divorce bill is a product of consultations after the 2013 deliberations of Parliament. The consultations were countrywide, and I would say more holistic if you look at the contents of the bill, because it tries to consolidate the different marriage laws that we have right now. And yes, the objection that cultural leaders may have to the bill is, one, in the name. Marriage and divorce didn't sit well with very many people because it was perceived to be an encouragement to end marriages. But also, like Keralu already said, there is a lot of misunderstanding, misconceptions around the bill. And also in discussion of the bill, people tend to be very sensational about the bill. They look at it as a tool to empower women to the disadvantage of men. The question of equality or equity comes in, and again it is misconstrued as threatening the structure, threatening the power, threatening
the patriarchy,
yes,
as we know it.
As we know it. And that is where the trouble lies. If we're able to have correct information given about the benefits of the bill, that would be very helpful. But also to demystify the understanding that it is a new bill. I mean that the bill is introducing something totally alien to Uganda. No. Uganda, as you already mentioned, has 5 different marriage laws and a divorce act. So this bill, the marriage bill, only aims to consolidate those fragmented laws and also harmonize certain inconsistencies in the law. For example, the age of marriage in the Customary Marriage Act, and I think in the Marriage of Africans Act, a parent could, with their consent, marry a girl under the age of 18. At the age of 16, you could marry off your daughter and to be perfectly legal. But that contravenes the provisions of the Constitution. Yes. So there needs to be a deliberate effort to educate the populace about the benefits of the bill for the family as a whole. If we start to break it down between men and women, then we will not make much progress. And this is a bill that we've had on the...
apparently the conversation is around there. You know, it is empowering women and children. Men are fearful of certain clauses.
Unnecessarily so.
Really?
Yeah.
Unnecessary.
Unnecessarily.
Okay,
so.
you're talking about... yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Picking from what she has just said, I think the language used to explain some of these things, the laws of Uganda, the bills, the whatever we are discussing, is sometimes divorced from the values of the people on the ground. The aspect of rights now, you see, when you talk about women's rights, children's rights, and you don't include our values, the cultural values, the norms, to explain what these rights are, then this brings a misunderstanding. She talked about relationships, interconnectedness in our philosophies. We have worked with 5 cultural institutions in Uganda now: Bunyoro, Buganda, Busoga, Keirkwaracholi, and ourselves. And we have developed the Kuramatira philosophy she's talking about. Is an old thing. Ubuntu Bulamu, has been there for a long time. But we came together and developed a group of values which we use for development. If you look at those values, marriage is one of them. Respect for a woman was one of them. Now, when explaining things in the bill, we tend to use, like you were saying, don't use technical legal language. You yeah?
They tend to
so
confuse.
they tend to use language that the people on the ground don't understand. But if you relate it to their values, principles, and practices, they will understand it better. You'll see them opening up and say, so this means this. So in the process of debating all this, I think the consultations, the learning, the sensitization and so on with cultural readers should be related to what they know, and you lead them to where something they don't know. Use their values, their principles to explain these things. And I think that's what has been lacking in this and causing unnecessary, like you said, resistance.
All right, if you're just joining us, we are discussing the Marriage Bill 2017. We're asking, is it a passage or a barrier? From the submission, we hear that culture is a hindrance in a way, or largely a hindrance. You know this. Online, we have Dr. Maxim left for other tasks, but he has been replaced. I'll give you the name of the person who replaced her, Evelyn Letio. She's a program specialist, ending violence against women. She's online. We have Honorable Amoding Monica, woman MP, Kumi. We have Peter Magela, Programs Manager, Chapter 4 Uganda. Peter, you can hear me well? Angela, are you there? Miss Angela Nakafero. All right, Peter, welcome. Miss Angela Nakafero, Commissioner Gender in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here.
All right, Honorable Monica Amoding, please tell me about consolidating. In this marriage bill, what do we mean Or the formulators, what do they mean if they say to consolidate? And is it achievable? Can you bring these other acts that we've talked about earlier, the Mohammedan, the Hindu, and the customary, can you bring all of them together and put them in one bill and it still makes sense? Honorable Amoding?
Trying to get there. I need to unmute myself.
Okay, as she gets ready, same question, I will pose that for all of us here. Is it possible as Honorable Amoding gets ready? Can you bring all these laws into one and still make sense, or it will be again trouble, causing more confusion? Is it possible?
I think what we can see, there was some misunderstanding in some of the laws. For example, what the Mohammedans provide for is a little bit different from what exists for the Christians, for the Hindus, and the other types of marriages. So given the big divide, then as one of the processes was one of the processes that was followed to make sure that the intentions of this bill is not lost, then the Mohammedan law was pulled out to have a specific law that actually provides for the Muslim brothers and sisters. The others, they actually have a lot of similarities. And in any way, when you try to assess the civil marriage, look at the church marriage, it's almost the same. The difference really is very negligible. So if we bring it together, I don't think it does cause any harm. When we look at the cultural, the traditional marriage, the customary marriage, it's almost similar. What differs probably would be the way it's conducted. It differs in terms of the status, monogamous and polygamous, which really is not so much different. But what we are trying to look at, we are trying to look at the rights of women that are embedded in all these different types of marriages. Can this law adequately protect the rights of women within the marriage institution? So I think for me, by and large, yes, they can be consolidated, they can be taken on together for the better of the women.
Susan, because where we are coming from, we're talking about the 1960s, you know, when this conversation started, and the bill has been, you know, stalling, hitting snags in more than 3 parliaments now, I think. And somebody will put it to whoever is advocating for the enaction of this bill that it failed and the formulators got to a point of starting to split. And that is how I think we came about with having 5 others. And then they will ask you, what makes you think that things have changed and this bill is going to be enacted now? Because as far as I see things, we're going to have further split of the same bill, so that we cater for group A, group this.
Okay, the different marriage laws, the existing ones, are inherited from our colonial masters. So the reforms are really an attempt to consolidate, but also to make the laws more relevant to our African, to our Ugandan context, to make them speak to the needs of our people. That is why at one point we also had clauses on cohabitation in the bill, because that is the lived reality of most Ugandans right now.
It is.
Yes. Now, this bill will work. It actually addresses many of the interests of different actors. It preserves the sanctity of the practice, the policy, the beliefs of the cultural system, because it states that marriages shall be conducted according to the customs of the different tribal groupings in the country. So it preserves that. But also we need to be very mindful of the constitutional provision that customs must not take away the dignity of a woman. In Article 33, I think, it states that all customs or cultures that yes, take away the dignity of a woman or treat them in an inhuman manner are prohibited. So custom and culture must fit within the provisions of the Constitution. And the bill as it is right now attempts to speak to some of those, to speak to Article 33. If you look at the provisions on widow inheritance, that's an expression I totally dislike, widow inheritance. It makes it a criminal offense. It speaks to the age of marriage, makes it 18. The issue of consent, which again takes you back to the question of child marriage, the question of forced marriage for either widows or women, because usually there is coercion to get that female to transact, you know, to get into that marriage.
I see. So in your view, there is not going to be a further split of this bill so that other groups are catered for, like it was back then?
I had forgotten to speak about...
The split started around 73, I think.
It has been an ongoing struggle. It has been an ongoing struggle. But also when you look at the civil and... The bill introduces Christian marriages. Previously, our Marriage Act basically spoke of a civil marriage, but right now the bill specifically says Christian marriages. And that is one of the interests that Christians and the Christian fraternity had been advocating for. So in addressing that concern by the Christian fraternity, it really opens the way for advance, for progress to be made in the enactment of the bill. And this is very important because in the past deliberations, the religious and cultural leaders were painted as stumbling blocks. Yes, they were painted as stumbling blocks. But since 2013, there's been a lot of progress. There's been a lot of progress, as very well elaborated by my colleagues here. And even within the Christian fraternity, there's been a lot of progress in coming to agreement around what a fair marriage law should look like.
If I may pick from there again.
Yes.
You asked about consolidation. Good thing, bad thing, possible, and so on. In my view, first as a lawyer and also as a cultural leader now, this consolidation is possible. It can be done, and it should be done. I haven't quite interrogated into what the Mohammedans are disagreeing with. Are they many? Are they very fundamental? Are they in what form? I haven't. So I cannot speak with a lot of authority on this. But I think something could be added into the bill to accommodate the parts that they disagree with. Say, okay, in this case, it will be done by according to Sharia, for example. And then I know in the bill there is also a possibility of saying they may also choose to Mohammedans who so wish can use this bill, which is already a point of convergence. The other thing is it now possible? I think it is. She correctly said our laws were mostly brought to us down from our colonial masters. And those colonial masters were not necessarily working in the interests of the African people or the cultural institutions on our cultures. They had to say Africans marry differently, civil, because they were also marrying in this country. And that caused further splits. Right now, there is a lot of engagement. People are talking to each other. We are talking. CSOs have come. And cultural institutions, like I've told you, are now working closer, much better than even before. I told you about the development of Kuramatira, Ubuntu Blamo strategy for development in our institutions. We are actually pushing Parliament to accept that there should be a curriculum of culture to be taught in schools. and we have gone very far. We have talked to members of parliaments already. So cultural institutions, religious institutions are now talking, engaging with each other a lot more. And communication has become even easier. People are talking through radio, television, like we are doing, and writing. So we are beginning to understand contexts and details much better than we were before. So I don't see why this should not work this time.
All right, I will still go back to Honorable Amoding. If you can hear me now, I'll ask the same question because you are at the right place where these things happen. And I want to hear your thought about consolidation, whether it is possible. Is it something achievable?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator and the team in the studio. Consolidation, I think, is the spirit that Parliament has adopted on many issues that seem to be dealing with a similar matter. When you look at the marriage and divorce bill, it entirely tries to deal with issues relating to marriage. What is a person? For example, how does a person enter into marriage? When you get into marriage, what are your rights, duties, and responsibilities in that marriage? And in any case, if you want to get out of the marriage, how do you get out of it? So basically, depending on the type of marriage that someone is contracting, generally the types of marriages are all catered for customary, and the consolidation attempts to bring together all the various laws that we have in place, initially enacted by Parliament as early as the 60s, as already talked about. So all these 5 legislations that are currently enacted or in existence are brought together by this marriage bill. And basically they all summarize how does somebody get into marriage, when you are in marriage, what are your rights and duties, and in any case, if the marriage breaks down, how do you get out and what are your rights in the circumstance. So consolidation would be the right way to go. And of course, for the practitioners in the legal fraternity, it is much easier to relate to the different ways, because most of the Ugandans actually contract 1 or 2 of those marriages. You see that the Christians will go for a customary marriage and then end up in a Christian marriage. Even the Muslims will contract a traditional form of marriage and then end up in the mosque. So consolidation is important, it is good, it is a fair way to look at this law. But I also wanted to handle the issue of the Muslims, which was talked about earlier. The law is providing for a provision in clause 2, which applies to also Muslims. The Muslim community would be able to be addressed under this law if it was enacted. But you recall that the earlier attempts to enact this law resulted into a spirited battle by the Muslim community, which did not want us to have, their rights catered for in marriage under this secular law. So as Parliament, we actually delayed the process to allow the Muslims bring a better law, which would then establish the Muslim Qadi courts, which are already in existence in Uganda, to be able to cater for those that want to proceed under the Qadi courts of Uganda. So consolidation vis-a-vis, existence of the other laws, the way to go is consolidation, given the various provisions that we have scattered in different laws, which are actually outdated in most cases because they are not in tandem with what is happening. We are now in the 21st century. The laws that we still have were inherited from the colonial masters. So I think it's very important that we consolidate.
All right, thank you, Honorable Amoding. Sorry. The other issue I want to introduce, maybe before I introduce that, Peter, can you hear me? Peter Magere.
Yes, I can.
All right, there was talk here that men are fearful of this marriage bill. And what do you think about that assertion?
True, there are men who are fearful. I remember during the debate, a number of men, including religious leaders, who were concerned about provisions in this bill. But the fear is mainly because of lack of understanding of what the bill is about and what it seeks to solve. I'll give you an example. During the debate, one of the most controversial issue was marital rape. And many men were saying, no, women are going to have us in prison and all that. But when you look at the provisions of marital rape, I don't see any, whether in culture or in whatever world, because the provisions will say if marital rape is where someone is forcing another to have sex, sorry, say that on TV, but when someone is sick, after childbirth, after, those situations. Now, to imagine that someone says, oh, no, this is the worst thing in our law, probably the person hasn't understood how it arises, because those are genuine concerns in any society. So, yes, a number of men have feared these laws. The other aspect I've seen men fearing this law was the divorce aspect of sharing property, and which is also misunderstood, because the issue was, if you contribute equally to this home, and our constitution also says you all have equal rights, so the man and the woman in a marriage are equal. So why then do you want, at divorce, one to go with nothing and another one to go with more? It shouldn't be equality in words. It should be equality in everything. Of course, that's also an aspect that has not been understood well by most men, and might be that's why we've had that kind of resistance. Yeah.
Angela Nakafero, Commissioner, I know that you have a radio show to attend shortly. I would like to hear from you the ministry's position in as far as the marriage bill is concerned. Where are we now?
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the previous speakers for their contributions. In terms of where we stand, for us as the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, it's about protecting the rights of everybody, and of course, protecting the rights of women and girls. Because what we see in the proposed law, the bill, is really very important, especially when we are talking about the rights of women and girls. Of course, child marriage is not right. These girls have to be in school or have to be somewhere where they're enjoying their rights as children. So the mere fact that the law is banning child marriage, for me, that's very positive. And it's already positive for us as a ministry. Similarly, you also find that there are also aspects of the way our cultures prepare women and girls for marriage. I want to pull out to give an example as female genital mutilation. As a ministry and as the government of Uganda, we said no to female genital mutilation because it's criminal for somebody's genitalia to be cut. It has serious implications, especially for the woman or the girl who undergoes female genital mutilation. So where we are finding the new law really banning all those negative cultural practices that prepare for marriage, like female genital mutilation, for us, we feel that this is a very positive development, and of course, it reinforces our law on prohibition of female genital mutilation. Within the marriage relationships, ladies and gentlemen, there are issues of property, as Peter has really outlined. It's right for people to have equal rights over property, which they've worked for, because it doesn't really help for us to disown women who have contributed quite a lot to the family when they're in a marriage relationship. And when the marriage ends, then she goes with nothing. We feel that also that is a violation of women's rights. And of course, once those aspects, contentious issues are really outlined and defined, and conditions provided for within the law, for us as a ministry, we are very happy with that. Because that will help us in terms of strengthening the family, in terms of holding people accountable. It's important. All of us, we've gone through similar circumstances where children have suffered at the hands of their parents, mothers and fathers. When they decide to separate, at the end of the day, the children are left in suspense. So we feel that once the government defines really what is required when marriages are contracted, when marriages are dissolving, in terms of separation, these are all very important developments that we need to really promote as a country, because at the end of the day, they all protect our rights as women, as girls, as children, but also as husbands, because it helps everybody when we have stable families, because we need stable families for us to be able to talk about national development. We cannot talk about national development when all the time the family is in conflicts. So for us as the ministry, we feel this is very important, and we really support the new law, the bill, and would feel so happy if this bill is really enacted into law as a country.
Go, Angela. There is question on the issue of information. People do not have enough information about this bill, and that's why you hear there is a misconception, this and that. As ministry, what are you preparing to do in order for people to, get to know what is contained in this bill and that it is to their advantage?
Thank you very much. As a ministry, we've done quite a lot in terms of creating awareness on issues that affect everybody's rights, not only about the marriage, but it's also important that other aspects around the family are well understood. And this is where we are trying our level best to strengthen the family as a unit for national development. Along the way, you'll bear with me, and I listened into Dr. Maxine's discussion. We are working quite a lot around ensuring that our harmful practices, we are able to transform these harmful practices into practices that protect the rights of everybody. We've done quite a lot around stopping child marriage. We've done quite a lot around female genital mutilation. We are doing quite a lot in terms of strengthening the aspect of the family and in terms of parenting, because some of these are norms and practices that we are inheriting from our family, from our fathers and mothers. And of course, it's the responsibility of the family to ensure that positive values and norms are passed on to the next generation. Parenting is very, very important for us. And as a ministry, we've already designed parenting guidelines, which we're disseminating and ensuring that we work with religious institutions and cultural institutions to transform these parenting guidelines and disseminate them at all levels. As a ministry, we are also saying that we need equitable gender division of labor, because in our circumstances, you find that usually both women and girls have had an unequal burden of labor, and this is reinforced within our marriage institution, whereby women almost do everything, and we are sensitizing the community and trying to promote the transformation of the norms around gender division of labor. The same applies to ensuring that as we are socializing our children, we are passing on equitable social norms. Social norms around sharing labor, social norms about respecting each other, social norms around eliminating gender-based violence, certain forms or certain aspects around marriage in Uganda are also issues of gender-based violence. So we are looking at ensuring that child marriage ends, and of course, aspects around child marriage like female genital mutilation, like bride price, like aspects like I know polygamy in most of our families is celebrated, but when we look at it from the perspective of women and girls, it's a practice that really endangers women, and of course denies women equal rights in a marriage relationship. So those are aspects that the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development is trying to build awareness around, and also ensuring that the practices around them are really taking into account the rights of women and girls in this country.
All right, thank you. Angela Nakafero is a Commissioner for Gender in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. You can go and attend your radio show. Thank you for joining us. Would you want to? Yes. Yes, before we go into a break, you can.
Yeah, Commissioner Angela is very right regarding issues of child marriages. How do we address all this, and how do we consolidate the provisions of the Constitution with our cultures? Now, according to the research that was conducted, it is true not every culture is positive. We need to recognize that there are some harmful cultural practices that actually need to be discussed, talked about, and subsequently changed for the benefit of humanity. However, what interests me most is that when we talk about child marriages, there are some communities where their cultures actually provided for even an age that was way higher than 18 years of age. I will talk about the Acholi community, talk about the Lango community. They had a principle that for a girl to get married, she had to mature and mature again. Maturity talked about in two aspects. Menstruation, breasts, was just the first sign of maturity for a girl.
Okay.
And then she's expected to undergo another form of maturity. And according to the Lango people, it is at a time when even the breasts have started sort of softening, they are able to articulately distinguish between what is right, what is wrong. They are able to take up responsibilities, and according to the conversations with the cultural leaders that come from those two regions, they estimate the earliest that the girl would get married was at the age of 21. So the question is, if that is what culture provides, why are we seeing child marriages in your communities? When did the rain start hitting you? So if this is our culture, are we being true to it? Are we living it? Are we being accountable as gatekeepers to the protection of the rights of our girls in our communities to ensure that their rights are protected? No one goes into marriage when they are young. It is bad in some places in Lira. Girls are being exchanged in markets. They go with the disguise that they are going to trade.
Pathetic.
And the other side comes with the cows or whatever it is, they exchange it in the market and off they go. But is that a reflection of the Lango culture? That's the biggest question that we should be interrogating. If at all it's not, then can we get back and we actually live truly to our norms and principles, what they provide? Just like we have defilement taking place today, yet we have regulations against it. Bad elements will always be there. The question is, people with power, people with responsibility, what are they doing to make sure that actually they protect each and every person within their communities? For the communities that had child marriages as a practice, what we are seeing now, the good thing is that culture is dynamic, it's not static. When challenges come by, when new information is released, culture tends to evolve to try to adapt to the new environment. And you'll find that many cultural leaders now are actually tending towards accepting the age of 18 as the right age for a girl to marry, simply because they've gotten information, they've learned through science this is harmful. And they've gone to an extent that they are making royal pronouncements to say that we do not want to see this. So again, we get back to them. We need to engage with them. If now this is what you seem to be generally accepting, you are making pronouncements. Can we get to see the implementation coming through to make sure that child marriages are ended in our societies?
Well put. Can we take a break?
Just a bit, yes. Before we take the break, because she has spoken something which touches on the Aluru culture. It is very similar to Lango and Acholi. Our direct translation would be a girl is married when the root of the breast has broken. Broken means it has softened. And that is usually 21 to 24 years. So we also ask ourselves, what went wrong? And when did it go wrong? And what can we do about this? Now, in Alur Kingdom, or Keralur, the king has come out. His Majesty Philip Olarke Rauni III came up with a pronouncement, no child marriage in my kingdom. And he directed the chiefs, 56 of them, you must ensure that no child is taken away in marriage. He went ahead in our Kuramatir approach of cultural values in action, and this was leadership in action. He now said, we are going to have customary marriage certificates. There will be no marriage, whether you're going to go to church or wherever, before the chief or the sub-chief on the ground has signed on a certificate that this girl is of age.
Then you can present it.
Then you can present it to whoever else you want to. And that means the father, the mother, the uncles are aware of this fact. Therefore, marrying a child off will become very difficult. The implementation she's talking about. And that is how the Keralur has started implementing it, using certificate of customary marriage for our kingdom. It's being promoted now with the register, by the way, a register at every chiefdom, so that it's known. No single child will be married maybe twice or when she's young, and so on and so on. So I think the question of child marriage is, like you said, rain caught us somewhere, and we are not aware.
So you register with the office of the traditional leader, and then sub-county.
And yes, and then you submit to the kingdom level also. Say, yes, this is our register. We are aware. This is so and so's daughter, and she's this young. The parents we know, she can marry. Now,
how about the sub-county?
Yes, now the sub-county.
What happens there?
The sub-county is...
Because elsewhere, I think it is even in the customary act, after introduction, Kwanjula, and I don't know what, you go to the sub-county and have it registered. Yes,
exactly. Now you go with the certificate to the sub-county. We have now said we should have a provision so that the sub-county will also acknowledge that there's a certificate from the ground down there. Now we can also sign and say, yes, this marriage has been done properly according to the customs of these people.
All right.
According to the law, any marriage conducted is done on behalf of the government. So when cultural leaders, when church institutions conduct marriages, they must submit copies of certificates and register it with the government to complete the process. Now, the cultural institution issues those certificates to especially aid in terms of having written evidence that you can actually immediately waive out if there is any marriage you want to object to. For example, if a man wants to contract a monogamous marriage with church, yet had already married a lady customarily. Now, this lady will have evidence to immediately present to whoever is going to officiate to the monogamous marriage to say, hey, the person you are going to marry is already married. And before these certificates came in, it was really a challenge for women to get that evidence that they can immediately prove that they are legally married to the man that is now opting to change to go to church. So whatever registration is, it is a matter of process, and it's a matter of compliance with statutory laws, and also to aid the woman to have immediate evidence in the event that they want to go to court.
All right, let's take a short break. We will return. You are watching a dialogue on culture and the marriage bill 2017. We're coming back. Welcome back from the break. You are watching a dialogue on culture and the marriage bill 2017. We're still taking on the conversation and quite spirited. These matters are very, very passionate, very touchy. You know, people want to listen in and know what is there, you know, fit, just in case. You know, and I was looking at your what you call a bridged position paper. This is a summary, I think so, of what you got from the research. Have you shared this already with members of parliament? Where else have you taken it?
This research has just been concluded. It's not yet officially out, but it will soon be. Before the end of this month, we will have it out and we will share officially. But what it tells us is to appreciate what is existing, that we can build on to actually advocate for the passing of this law. How can we bridge the differences, the gaps that are currently existing that seem to be inhibiting the passing of this bill? And at the same time, I think it's a tool that we can use to hold our cultural leaders to account. They are the gatekeepers of this culture. To what extent are they ensuring that our legacy, our heritage, does not go to waste? So I think that will help us to actually advocate for the passing of this bill. And there are a number of things actually that it talks about. Talk about the issue of widow inheritance. Some members have already alluded to that. Widow inheritance, yes, it's true, it used to exist. And as I said, culture is dynamic. It's not, yes, it's not static. Once information or an event happens that poses a challenge, because we exist as human beings to make sure that we create for ourselves an environment that we would like to live in. Widow inheritance, probably at the time it was started as a practice, was specifically meant to provide protection for the woman. Men used to hunt. Women were not allowed to go to hunt. And the reason behind that was to protect the woman as a sacred person, because in some cultures, the position of a woman actually comes next to God. When we get onto Mother Earth, the woman takes that higher position. And the purpose was to increase on the numbers of the clan for purposes of security, for purposes of growing the clans. So hunting was not possible for them. And because they would be exposed to danger anyway. Yeah. And then also once if the father figure goes, how are these children helped to be protected? Where do they draw their learning, the role models from? So that is the perspective from which widow inheritance came about.
Okay.
But is it still relevant today, especially in the era of HIV and AIDS? And according to the research, this has actually sort of changed. People have re-engineered. They are taking up the responsibility without the conjugal obligation being put. So if that is what is currently happening and it is a positive thing, why then don't we build upon it and adopt it as our culture, and we continue with the objective of protecting this woman and her children without engaging into sexual acts that are going to harm them further? But still around...
something symbolic.
Yes,
yeah.
But still around widow inheritance, according to the research, we found that in a number of communities, the issue of consent was very vital. The issue of the woman having a choice was also very much respected. the family wouldn't just rise up to say that so and so, you are the one going to inherit Rosemary. No, it was never like that. From the research that we have conducted, what we've gotten to understand. And in any way, this also used to promote sort of social cohesion between the different people. If a man knew that in the event that my brother dies, or in the event that I die, I will be probably coming in to support this other family. So why should I hurt someone that I am going to later probably live with? And will I be actually expressing or extending the duty of care to my late brother? So in most cultures, the choice of a woman, she's consulted, she's given the option. If she doesn't want to marry, what seems to be coming through from the research is that she is respected, but then the right for her to remarry is what is hanging as unresolved. For example, if she wishes to go, they will not stop her, but then her other rights are abused to that extent. But the cultural provisions say, as long as you are willing to take care of your children, you will remain in your household, you will take care of the children, and whoever is appointed by the clan to provide you with support in case you have land wrangles coming up, who is supposed to stand with you in that gap, then is appointed, but they do not impose on them. Although in some cultures, like in Karamoja, you don't ask, they will assign you. So to that extent, we feel that such cultures need to also change as the changes and different challenges are occurring.
All right. There is another patent issue of divorce and bride price. You had that come out quite strongly, and people all over were like, what is government intending, you know, by having this bill enacted? Although it was not enacted, the debate continued. And I think this is where information has to come out strongly, you know. The CCFU, ministry, other CSOs and other stakeholders, they have to be to come out very, very strongly about the issue of divorce and bride price.
Yeah. I think as we go into the conversation of reform of marriage laws, we need to accept that divorce and separation are a reality. And we need to understand that that situation needs to be dealt with anyway. If a marriage breaks down irrevocably, it needs to be dealt with anyway, because there are many issues to be managed. There is the question of children, there is the question of property, there is the question of rights to that property. So even as we have this conversation, I would like Ugandans to know that we already have a Divorce Act. So the question of divorce is not new. It's not alien. Many times these marriage reforms are touted as foreign. It's we are trying to be too chizungu. No, we have an existing Divorce Act. And divorce needs to be really dealt with, particularly the question of property, because that is one of the most contentious. Next to custody of children, that is the most contentious issue arising from a divorce petition. Who owns what? How is it divided? Can you prove that you own it? And unfortunately for women, they tend to leave decisions related to property to a male figurehead. It may be your husband, it may be your father, it may be your brother. And even where you are contributing monetarily to the acquisition of a property, to the acquisition of an asset, many times you do not know the detail of how that transaction has been concluded. All you know is you handed over part of your savings and you trust that your partner has actually registered this property in your names. So divorce is an issue that needs to be dealt with once and for all. The marriage laws that we have right now do not even define matrimonial property. There's not clear definition of what matrimonial property is. And that's the beauty about this bill. It defines matrimonial property as that owned in common in marriage. But it also makes the provision for property to be held individually. Yes. It also introduces the idea of a prenuptial agreement so that the parties can decide what constitutes matrimonial property. And that is very important. If you walked into any law firm or walked into even just a random police station and asked how many people are fighting over property, that is one of the highest ranking.
Files are many.
Yes, the files are many there. And then the question of the beauty about this bill also is that it does not deal with ancestral property. Ancestral property, property that has been inherited down the family lineage. So it restricts itself to property that a party will acquire of themselves or during the marriage or before it. So again, it preserves that ancestral property, which also is usually a huge source of controversy and turmoil in families. If you come to the question of bride price, the bill operationalizes a constitutional judgment made a number of years ago relating to bride price, and it specifically says that marriage gifts once handed over to the bride's family cannot be returnable. And that is very important. If I can elaborate on what my co-panelists have already spoken about, protecting the rights of women. Marriage gifts as a process, as part of the processes into which we contract marriages, are very important for us. It's one of the things that identifies us as Ugandans. But it also has the potential to be a trap when the marriage starts to show some cracks. I'm sure you've had stories where people say when they got married, they were told by their parents that, here there's no more room for you. We are going to burn your bed and use it at the fireplace. So you do not come back. Whatever marriage gifts have been brought have been used by your brother to marry a wife. So when the marriage starts to show some cracks or disagreements here and there, you find such a woman, such a wife is caught between a rock and a hard place. Because it's hard to go back home because there's no room for you. But also on the other side, your husband feels, he's making a loss, if I should use that term, by you going away. And many times people say, give me back my things. And that is where somebody is locked up in a toxic relationship.
Probably the word you're running away from is bought.
Yes.
Some men, bravely tell women,
yes.
I bought you.
Yes.
I find it to be
I was trying to avoid using it.
Very strange.
Yes. I bought you. You've had these expressions where people say, but we married you. You are our wife. It's not an accident. It comes because of that belief that once marriage gifts have changed hands, then this woman is open to the advances and she's at the mercy of everyone else in the family. So it keeps women locked down in situations where they could be emotionally abused, they are physically abused, and they cannot go home because they might have to come back. So it's very important that this bill actually addresses the question of marriage gifts and says that they are not returnable. That is very important, especially if we want to address issues around violence against women and girls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Evelyn, you want to supplement?
I want to add this from the cultural perspective.
All right.
Among the Alur, let's now talk. There can be peculiarities in the marriages. Marriage is considered sacred, and marriage is forever. Therefore, when we talk about marriage and divorce, and you hear some cultural leaders resisting, I think it's because of our philosophy that once you are married, it's intended to be forever.
There is no point of return.
There is no point, because once you introduce that, it's like you are saying there is a possibility. Actually, for them, they think there should be no possibility, which is not the case, like you said. These days, again, where did the rain get us? It's common to marry today and tomorrow. I know of a situation where people wedded during the celebration after the church. The man took another woman and went to another city. And the lady remained celebrating, and we say, where is husband? And the marriage died there. So, first, our philosophy is marriage is forever. Marriage is sacred. A woman, in our language, is called rain. We have given you rain. Wamio irikot. And you gave us sunshine. You know, the parents of the child, of the woman, would say, they gave you rain, you gave them sunshine. And that's how important a woman was in the life of the Alur. So marriage itself is supposed to be permanent and sacred. Now, to prove that there's a marriage, there was this thing called bride price, or marriage gifts, which we're calling it now. There is a problem when somebody begins to talk about buying a woman. In the Alur nomenclature, it is not there, that I have bought you. It's only a drunkard or a stubborn man who is just trying to make himself notorious who speaks like that. They don't speak like, I bought you. They say, I knew me, I married you. Meaning the whole process from negotiation involving family and so on and so on, I did that. Now, these gifts were also used as evidence of that marriage. So when they are not now returned, they are akin to a certificate of marriage. Once the marriage fails, you revoke the certificate, isn't it? And that's it. Now, in the case of the customary marriage, it is also akin to that. If you take back, then you would have dissolved the marriage. So it was like evidence of a certificate. It was like a certificate of marriage, the gifts. Now, challenge is, we know, culture must evolve in this respect, because now it has become commercialized. Some children are not marrying because the demands are very high, or others are marrying experimental marriages, which used not to be in culture. You just pay this, and then you pay that, and then you pay that, and then tomorrow the marriage has failed, and so on and so on. So there should be some need to stop this kind of thing. And by the way, marriage gifts in Alur used not to be returned also, if the man was the one at fault. If you cause problems and they try to resolve the conflicts and identified you as the problem causer, you will never collect your bride price back. Never. It is finished. Now, in the case of the woman also, if they really talked and talked, said, this woman, what is happening with you? Why can't? That is when the man can say, you see, we have tried everything. She's like that. Then they can allow the bride price to be taken back. You can see how difficult it was. Now, it's good also the law is coming to say, don't give it, because for us also, it was not just given. It was not supposed to be returned. Of course, I see in the prenuptial agreement, there is a challenge. I ask myself, and I'm very sure when I go home, my cultural leaders will also ask me, why is the law coercing, so to say, two consulting, loving adults to agree on division of wealth in case the marriage fails? Did they come into this marriage knowing that at some stage it will fail, which would be contravening the philosophy, the cultural philosophy, where you have married, that's the end of the story. So if you begin to say, let us negotiate now, in case it fails, how, that is going to be challenging. They need to be convinced that it's not that. It is being done because situations have arisen where women are also owning property and the men tend to take it from them. There they will understand. And also, I think I'll agree that I don't see much to debate here.
Okay, I
Thank you.
want to go back to our panelists online. I told you Dr. Maxime was replaced by Ivrin, and we have Peter Magila is still online. He is with us, and Honorable Amoding Monica, the woman MP of Kumi district. Peter, I want to come back to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. As Chapter 4, what do you think can help have this bill enacted?
I think the first thing is to have more understanding of what this bill is providing for. Of late, there has been more negative and sometimes negative based on what we now call fake news as opposed to negative based on fact. As you can already see, many people opposed to the bill have really not internalized it. The other problem which the bill has faced over the years is the false impression that it's about women. And we all know marriage is not about women. Marriage is about men and women. Whether it's marriage, whether it's divorce, separation, succession when one of them is dead, it's about both men and women. So this bill is not about women. It is about two people, a man and a woman, who gets into marriage. And it deals with how they can get into marriage, including the pre-marriage issues, the during marriage issues, could be issues of separation, could be issues of property, which my colleagues have talked about, and divorce. I know many religious and cultural leaders don't want to divorce, but here is the thing. If we allow people to freely enter into a marriage, we should allow them to freely live. Let marriage not be a prison. Why am I saying let marriage not be a prison? It's because a lot of times when you hear about religion and culture, they say this thing is for life. Come on, people have died for being forced into relationships that have gone bad. People have been beaten, injured, and the rest. So let's understand that whereas someone's marriage might be okay and it can go on for life, there is that other person who, if we forced him or her into marriage for just another day, we might be dealing with a dead person, because it's a fact. It's a fact we live with. So it's important that we look at these facts and we stop being selfish. We stop being saying, you see, because my father has married and they've lived for 80 years. They've lived for, so yes, those were lucky they lived for all that. And the law provides for that. The law needs that. But the law also provides for that other one who may not be as lucky, who may not be able to live like that. So there is need for the whole community and everyone to understand these other aspects. Another important thing which I wanted to talk about, I find goes to the root of our discussion today, is the present laws treat customary marriage or marriage according to our cultures as an inferior marriage to the rest of the marriages. And that's a very absurd position. You know, we've been 52 years of independence. We have a law called the Marriage of Africans Act, which law is supposed to govern how Africans marry each other, because there is another law, presumably, which governs how whites should be marrying each other. And that law is operating in Uganda. We really need to move away from that. Right now, people go and marry customarily, an introduction, Panjula, whatever they call it in different languages. But because the practice has treated that customary marriage as inferior, the person is forced to marry the same wife or the same husband in church because he wants to. The belief is the church one is the marriage, the other one is nothing. And it's time we recognize that actually all of them are marriages and all of them are equal, all of them are the same standing. And we should promote all of them. It's a matter of choice. If someone decides only to do an introduction, that's well and good. If someone decides to go to church or to the registrar or to whoever, that's well and good. And the law is recognizing all types of marriages as equal, giving the parties the same rights. So you should be able to get the same rights if you just did an introduction, which is a marriage. You should be able to get the same rights as a couple that went to church or a couple that went to the registrar. That's another important aspect that many people need to understand, whether you're a cultural leader, whether you are a church leader or just an ordinary person, that this law seeks to put that to the same standing. Of course, my colleagues have talked about consent. The thing, as chapter 4 we emphasize, is free informed consent. It's one thing to have consent. It's another thing to have free informed consent, where are the parties freely consenting to this arrangement? And do they know the consequences? Are they informed about what they are going into? And that also goes with the rights which I talked about earlier, the rights to say what happens when 2 years, 5 years down the road, this thing you consented to, you feel does no longer works for you. So what should be is that you should have a right, and society shouldn't make it difficult for you, whether man or woman, to move on, especially where this thing which, remember, society wasn't there at the time you were deciding to get married. So why is society coming in at the time you are deciding to leave the marriage? Because for us as society, we come in at the point where you are throwing us a party, but we never come in at the time when you are deciding who to get married to. And I believe it should be the same principle that you came into this through your free will. We should let you decide through your free will whether to stay or to leave. That should help us sort out a number of domestic violence issues which have affected both men and women, including children, that we face, and probably where people cannot tolerate each other even when they are married, and they end in fights instead of being able to move on. So those are some of the things we feel. And importantly, our legislators, the last time this law came into parliament, I believe a number, especially the male legislators, did not appreciate a number of provisions in this law. Provisions as to property, they felt it's only women who want to take property, but the law says you share the property as you have. So what happens is a situation where the woman bought the car and the man bought the land. Or a situation where the men, because we have also in this country, we have a situation where we have men who are poor and women who are rich. So shouldn't it be that now the man is taking from the woman? How come we are only debating it as if the woman is the only one who takes? So we need to understand that. The issue, I've already talked about the issue of marital rape, which is a very, very sad situation, because we've had women hospitalized, we've had women suffering the worst you can imagine because of situations of marital rape. But here we are saying women are not your property. So if she's not your property, then she should be able to decide situations where she cannot go into what the husband wants her to go. And the husband should also be able to appreciate that it's this situation that I cannot go beyond this. And if, of course, the law also provides for systems where if it is being done unreasonably, where the unreasonableness can be addressed. So those are some of the issues we think need to be reformed. People need to understand the law. We need to fight our biases. Some are cultural, some are not. Appreciate the law as is. Appreciate the situation that at the time my grandmother was getting married in, it might be 1940s, the world was very different from the world we are in today. So we need our understanding of rights, our understanding of property, our ownership of property, our relationships have changed. And because they have changed, we need to have this law that can address those changes so that the family can live with today's realities. Yes, those are my contributions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ivrin Letio, I'll come to you if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, Mr. Walusimbi.
There is a number of legislation or acts, for that matter, that protect women and children from violence. And somebody will ask, what special thing is it that the Marriage Bill 2017 is going to introduce that will supplement to the existing acts in order to protect women and children?
Okay. So thank you very much. I think I want to start by applauding the panelists in today's discussion. I was just smiling when Peter was talking about property, including the fact that women have property. I just saw a message from a friend who said, please tell the viewers that one, men also stand to benefit from women who have property, and two, that when we have a law on marriage, it instills in them trust and confidence, and they can invest without necessarily hiding some of their investments because they know they are protected. But that side aside, you were asking me about laws that exist and what is the value addition of the marriage act or marriage bill that we are trying to work towards. We have, as indeed you have stated, many laws. We have a domestic violence act in Uganda that consolidates and protects women, girls, and people within domestic settings, trying to ensure that issues of safety are maintained within a domestic setting. A domestic setting is where people live within close proximity. And if you look at our data, it actually tells you that domestic violence is the number one type of violence that women experience in Uganda. So yes, we have a domestic violence act. It does not speak a lot about issues around marriage, as we've discussed here. And so if we are going to consolidate and ensure issues of protection for women, we certainly need to speak specifically to certain things like marriages. We do have a law like the Anti-FGM Act. It specifically addresses issues around FGM. And of course, FGM is a type of violence. It does speak about ending impunity on FGM and the penalties that are related to people who cut girls. And Madam Commissioner earlier on talked about that. But it does not speak, about marriage. And yet we know that FGM most times is a passage into marriage. And so if we do not specifically go ahead to talk about things like the Marriage Act and talk about the specific provisions in it, then we are not together strengthening the legislations and the laws that protect women. So yes, we have laws, but we need to have these laws reinforce one another. Monica, earlier on, Honorable Monica talked about consolidation. And so while we are talking about consolidating these laws, there are also laws that cross-reference. So for example, as we are talking about the marriage bill, we also have a succession amendment bill in Parliament that is talking about ways in which we can ensure that women can be able to access property that most times they are discriminated against. As we're speaking about these laws, we are talking about a law like the sexual offences bill that Monica is championing in Parliament that also helps to reinforce these laws. So we cannot sit here and say one law holistically addresses the issues of protection for women. We need to be able to look at the different spheres of life and ensure that these laws are all in place. They speak to one another, they reinforce one another, so that a woman is protected and can access the husband's property. She can access the father's property because the Succession Amendment Act is going to address that. That this woman in marriage is protected because the Marriage Act addresses that. That this same woman is also protected against violence within her home. So that's why we still continue with this law, because there are still gaps and there are specific issues within marriage that the other laws do not address.
So much.
Yeah, if I could come.
You want supplement?
Yes, I wanted to say something,
Okay.
not directly about what Evelyn has finished, because she has elaborately talked about the different laws that we need and why we need them. But what I wanted to say from the research conducted, actually in some communities it was found that divorce, even within the cultural institutions, the cultural communities, there was an open door for divorce. It's not that it's completely strange to the cultural institutions. That should be very clear. But they were grounds, just like the statutory laws, they were grounds upon which divorce was allowed. For example,
But rarely.
consistent domestic violence. Among the Batoro, the sisters to the man would actually, plus the parents, they would withdraw this woman from you if you were violent and take her away from you and punished you for being violent. And if you didn't change, they would say you are not going to bring us shame, and they would separate you and take back the daughter to her natal home. So it's not that divorce is completely foreign
So
to the cultural setting.
There is a link there in the bill,
Yes.
and then
So if at all there
back in
was
culture.
that open door, because things like witchcraft, or if you ended
Yes.
up marrying someone who is a blood relative unknowingly, they were rituals done, and that divorce would, rather that marriage would
rituals to
end.
clear up the incest.
So divorce should not be looked at by the cultural leaders as something foreign. However, the issue is about the purpose for which marriage is actually founded. The culture is a little bit slow in pushing for divorce or encouraging divorce to take place. Just like the courts of law. In the courts of law, when you are applying for a divorce, you will not apply for it today and get it tomorrow.
They keep encouraging you to
exactly.
go into
They
talks.
will leave the window open for
Yeah.
reconciliation in the event that happens. So there is a lot of similarity, really, between the cultural provisions and the provisions in the statutory laws. So with this bill, when there is an issue of divorce being talked about and people say we don't want to hear it, really it's not that it never happens.
Like Peter said, where there is marriage, of course, separation has to be there, and divorce for that.
Yes,
matter.
but the issue is, are we building the family unit?
Exactly.
Are we ensuring that there is stability for families where our children will be nurtured, where values will be inculcated into the children that will turn out to be the responsible citizens for the future? So what is really critical for us is, how do we address all these other issues that make the marriage bitter? How do we address the violence that is happening against the women and the children in the home? How do we address the issues of people doing things, for example, secretly? You are not providing for your home, you are spending the money elsewhere. This woman is putting in efforts to make sure that property is earned, But on the other hand, someone is not actually revealing and doesn't want this property to come forth. So it sort of portrays a negative foundation upon which that marriage was founded. So it is better that we actually look at those circumstances and factors that are making marriages detested, and we work upon them. But in the event that the marriage is really not working out, I think there is also that open door for a woman to actually exit.
Before she concludes, we have got cultural resources that deal with all these situations, including divorce, like she said. They can separate, and the conditions are there. Once they are met, people can leave. But the challenge with cultural institutions is, or culture, is that there's the element of involvement of the people around you. Why? Because when it comes to conflict resolution, they are the ones who must resolve. And if it comes to social capital, you need support from the community, yes, they must get involved. And therefore, this divorce, if it was left to just the two people, we loved each other, we married, now we don't love, we want to go away. Society tends to say, no, wait a moment, there are other issues which touch on us. For example, the issues in the marriage, the children, they remain community responsibility when you separate, because one will marry the other, one will not. Then these children will go in a completely different environment, either to the mother's new marriage or to the father's new wife. And you know the challenges that come with this. So society tends to say, yes, conflicts can be there. The best would be use our resources, cultural tools, to resolve them and stay rather than go. They don't encourage, but where the chips are down, like the Americans will say, they let you go.
In some communities, there was a bit of encouragement. I don't know, like you say, culture is dynamic, but like the Sengas, they will be so concerned. How can you leave marriage? It is very, very shameful. And you know, girls kept in there and things turned violent, you know, sometimes.
And I think that is where the problem is, the culture of silence. Peter, I'm glad Peter talked about the issue of marital rape. And how is it viewed within the cultural setting or from the cultural communities? The research that was conducted reveals that marital rape is actually detested. The biggest challenge is on getting the evidence and also for the women to speak out, because it was actually something shameful. It's a taboo for a man to rape his own wife. And the very first people that would come in to resolve this, as you've rightly said, the Sengas, the mother-in-law, the father-in-law, will be very swift, will be very fast to come in to sort this out, and they will try to silence the woman, to say, shh, don't talk about it. And what do you think that implies? If father, mother, Senga saying, shh, please don't talk about it, it's shameful. So if it is shameful, then why do it? That means culture doesn't actually condone it. It condemns it, that's why it is taken as taboo. But what we need to deal with is actually the culture of silence on the part of the women to let this happen. And culture also had a way to deal with some of these. And it's right that in the marriage bill, some of these circumstances are spelled out. For example, postnatal period.
Yes.
The man is not supposed to have sexual relations with the wife until she has healed. How was it being done under culture? You go away to your mother and be nurtured for how many, for a particular period, then you come back when you have healed. Or in some other cultures, your mother comes around, lives with you there, and sometimes it's taboo for someone to engage sexually when the mother-in-law is actually present. So there are certain ways through which culture was trying to provide for all this. Sure. But what we need to deal with around that is the issue.
All right, we should start to wind up now. Susan, you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to speak to...
Maybe before you do that, let me go back to Honorable Monica, so that we wind up on the side of online. And Monica, I want to ask, the 10th Parliament, clearly you won't be able to pass this. You won't. It will be a miracle if at all it happens. So who do we go to? We want to advocate now. Where do we go to? You people are busy looking for votes at this time.
want you and the public to lose hope, because the 10th Parliament expires in May next year. And so clearly we have some months of work, but of course, starting from where you started, it disadvantages such bills. And we all know that most of the gender-related laws usually are delayed for the well-known reasons that you know that we still have a male chauvinistic society, and the stereotypes have still also portrayed themselves in Parliament. These kind of laws are delayed. The marriage law has been delayed. The sexual offences succession amendment bill has all been delayed. And we are hoping that at least we can get 2 or 3 out of them. But the place to go to is the Speaker's office. I want to inform the public that the marriage bill is on the order paper, and the Speaker has distributed the copies to members of Parliament already. I have my copy. I got it in my pigeonhole, meaning that anytime she's going to call out this particular item on the order paper. This includes also the other laws that we already have, the Sexual Offences Bill, the Succession Act as well. So we are believing that it can still be worked on, and the place to target is the Speaker to expedite, because I'm happy to report that we have consensus with the religious leaders, and I'm happy to note today in the studio the men, Peter and the Attorney General of the Kerlur Kingdom. The men seem to have now perceived the law in a better way. So we believe that the stakeholders are together, and the cultural institutions, we have also been able to engage with them as shown by CCFU. So we are ready. We are ready for this law. And we want to say that if the Speaker can put it on the order paper, members of Parliament who will be present in the House can debate on this. And I pray they do so, especially the men. Well, the men have been individuals that have really looked at this bill from another perspective. But over time, over the years, we've kept engaging, and we believe that whatever is not agreeable can be dealt with on the floor, in the House, and not the whole bill to be cast out for 1 or 2 items that may not be agreeable. So I think it can work out.
Honorable Amoding Monica, the woman member of Parliament, Kumi District. Susan, you wanted to say something before. We have 3 minutes left.
Yes, I just wanted to speak to the question of contribution. When we're talking about divorce, one of the things that needs to be looked at is contribution. And that is a question that still many law enforcement, judicial officers grapple with in determining who gets what are the interests. And this is very important because women contribute significantly. It may not be visible, it may not be tangible, it may not be monetary, but the question of contribution is something that this the marriage bill begins to speak to. For a woman, a wife, to earn, to have a beneficial interest in a property, even when she has not contributed in a significant manner. As a parting shot, I would just like to speak to the government, to our Parliament. Honorable Moding has stated rightly that the bill is on the order paper. But you know, this bill has been on the order paper for this is the 3rd year starting.
You heard me, I used the word miracle.
Yes, it has been on the order paper for that long, and it has never been discussed. So what is the problem? Okay. We stand on the shoulders of our parliamentarians because this is a government bill, so that this bill is squarely within Parliament's court to be able to demand for it to be prioritized at that level. There is only so far that civil society can go to have the bill prioritized and discussed and passed. Thank you.
Yes, the Attorney General of Kiaru.
Thank you very much.
Just sign out. We have less than a minute.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear panelists, and CCFU especially, and the development partners who made this possible. My appeal is to our cultural leaders, wherever they are, that on reading this bill, I don't see a lot of contradictions with our different cultures. What I see is only context and rationalization for us to understand the bill better.
Okay.
Once that could be done by our mother ministry, for example, the Ministry of Gender, our partners, CCFU, and others, this bill should be passed as quickly as possible. And I would also like to add that culture has plenty of resources that deal with all these things, marital rape, defilement, and all, and so on and so on and so on. They are there. Just interrogate with us, do research, further research, and you'll find that these tools can be used to help us and have a very good law.
Thank you, Honorable Bob Opio. Barbara, in
just a few seconds as I wind up, for me, what I would like to say is, let's manage the information better. Let's build on the positive that is already existing within the cultural communities. Let's engage the cultural leaders with evidence to put them to account, and we seek to understand the context. And lastly, let's continue engaging. The war will for sure be won.
Thank you, Ms. Barbara Babwetera, the Deputy Executive Director, Cross Culture Foundation of Uganda. Thank you so much. Mr. Honorable Bob Opio, the Attorney General, Kearu, please greet the leaders when you go back. And Ms. Susanna Chen, thank you so much. And our panelists online, Dr. Maximo, of course, left time back. Angela Nakafero, thank you so much. Peter Magera, thank you. Honorable Amoding Monica, I thank you once again. And Evelyn Letiu at UN Women. That is it from us here. You've been watching the Dialogue on Culture and the Marriage Bill 2017. My name is Frank Walisimbi. Have a good evening.